Try to do is to work with the judiciary. I've had a series of conversations with the Chief Justice of Nigeria. As a matter of fact, just in the past few days, we've also had a couple of conversations around establishing special offenses courts, around trying to improve the performance of the judiciary and all of that. We think those conversations are important because I think that that's one way of ensuring that we're all on the same page about improving efficiencies. But it's also important that there is commitment on the part of our profession, the legal profession, to reform, and these are some of the issues that we're trying to contend with. But certainly, the government is committed to it. We're doing our part. And we think that it's important to work with the other arms of government, with the legislature and the judiciary, and we're doing that.
One thing that Mr. Gulari touched on is that in the public sector, they decided in Georgia to pay the workers more, offer them bonuses as a way of deterring corruption. Are you exploring that idea as well?
It's a fantastic suggestion. But let me just say that we're in a bind of sorts, because at the moment we're spending 70% of revenues on remuneration, essentially, on, public sector remuneration and overheads, which leaves a paltry less than 30% for capital expenditure. So already we're spending a huge amount of money. What we need is a much more efficient civil service, that is paid more. But in order to do so today, we certainly need to increase revenues. So in some sense, it's a chicken and egg situation, because in order to increase revenues, you need to increase, So I think that what we're going to probably end up doing is what we've done with some of the parastatals. In other words, identifying certain government services that must be remunerated differently in order to be able to increase efficiency. One of those are some of the revenue-generating agencies, for instance. For instance, the FIRS, that's the Inland Revenue Service, improving remuneration, especially bonuses, will do a lot of good. That we saw happen in Lagos with the Lagos Inland Revenue Service, where because there were bonuses, there was improvement in revenue and reform, people were able to do better, even in our judicial system, because we paid better, because we remunerated better, people were able to improve. But some of it has to be targeted, because you can't have, an overall increase in expenditure today of government expenditure, especially on remuneration, because already that's already somewhat skewed in favor of recurrent expenditure, which is a problem.
And in terms, I want to dig deeper on something you touched on, which is improving Nigeria's tax revenue, which is huge. You recently signed an order basically trying to encourage wealthy Nigerians to come forward with their income details and pay more in taxes. When I read that, I initially thought to myself, that sounds great on paper. On paper, you look at that idea, it sounds wonderful. But in practice, if there are no extreme consequences for tax evasion, how do you get wealthy Nigerians to come forward and say, hey, these are my assets, this is my income, let me pay you more in taxes? Is that realistic?
Yeah, but what it is this. We have what we call the Voluntary Assets Declaration Scheme. And what that says is, in 90 days, come up with a self-assessment that tells us where all of this is at. How much are you earning? How much are you paying in taxes? Pay the difference. We'll forgive penalties, we'll forgive the past, so long as you come up with this within a 90-day period. Now, of course, as you know, many countries, the UK is opening up a beneficial ownership scheme so that we will know in another few months what you own abroad, especially what you own in the UK and countries like that. So if you don't do this within 90 days, then we will go ahead with criminal prosecution where necessary, because there are already criminal prosecution provisions in the tax laws. So the whole idea is that you have a 90-day amnesty, you have a 90-day period of grace. After that period, we're going to just go ahead and enforce the law.
So, Mr. Vice President, you can guarantee that from this moment onwards, wealthy Nigerians who avoid paying taxes will no longer be able to get away with that. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what the scheme is about. That's exactly what it's about. And
so how do you enforce that? How will you go forward and enforce that to make sure that's the case?
No, it's very straightforward. If we discover after the 90-day period that you're hiding away some money or you have not declared those assets that you ought to have declared in order for us to know what your revenue is and all of that, then it's simple. It's very straightforward. Evasion of tax under our law is criminal. There is civil liability and criminal liability. It's very straightforward. The only thing that can prevent possible prosecution is if we don't discover it. The moment we discover it, hey.
Well, how will you go about discovering it then?
No, I've just said so. And I've just given one example. Okay, if you have assets in the United Kingdom, for instance, under the beneficial ownership scheme in the UK now, we are going to know who owns what in the UK.
In the UK.
So that's going to be made public now. That will become public. Mm-hmm. Now, many wealthy Nigerians own assets in the UK. And several other countries in the OECD are also opening up. So we're bound to know very soon what people own abroad in particular. What you own here is probably easier to discover. That's probably easier to discover. And we'll find out in due course. I think the most important thing is that we've set the framework and we've given a sensible period of grace. And already, frankly, quite a few people, quite a few Nigerians are coming up and discussing the terms of their payment of whatever areas.
So already, you're saying that wealthy Nigerians have come forward voluntarily and said, "This is what I owe."
Yeah. We've got quite a few. We're expecting very many more. Some who are here in this audience.
Raise up your hand if you owe Nigerian government taxes. We'll come and collect it today. So while President Buhari has been away, you've obviously been praised a lot because you've implemented a lot of reforms. Now that the president is back, can we expect the same pace of those reforms, of those executive orders to continue?
Yes, I think we can. And the president, of course, as you know, is very committed to everything we've done. I mean, as much as was possible, we worked together on most of these issues. And what we're doing essentially was executing a plan, the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, and we intend to continue to execute it as efficiently as possible. So I think we should expect double effort as opposed to a single effort now that the president is back. And I'm sure that you're going to see very strong leadership, and we're going to see a great deal of improvement.
Is the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan reflected in the budget? And can we start seeing results from the plan as soon as this year?
I didn't get that.
I said, is the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan actually reflected in the budget?
Yes.
And can we specifically start seeing results from that plan as early as this year?
Okay. First, it's reflected in the budget. As a matter of fact, it's the basis of the budget. The plan is the basis of the 2017 budget and the 2018 budget. As a matter of fact, it will be the basis for our budgets from 2017 to 2019. That will be the basis. The plan itself is meant to go until 2020. So it is. Now, every aspect of it is reflected in the plan. Our focus on agriculture, our focus on power, on infrastructure, especially railway, roads, and all of that. Ensuring that we spend more than ever before on capital. For instance, in 2016, we spent about 1.3 trillion on capital, which is the largest ever spent on capital in this country. And we intend to increase the capital spend year on year. That's part of the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. Part of it also is a power sector reform, where we're hoping that we'll be able to do both off-grid and on-grid power and improve power supply, because that obviously is one of the most basic needs for the infrastructural takeoff and for the takeoff of several sectors. So the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan is really the basis of the budget, and we expect to see results going forward.
Overall, do you think Nigeria has truly, and I want you to answer this from your heart, not as a politician, do you think Nigeria has actually learned its lessons from the oil crisis? This is not the first time that Nigeria has experienced high oil prices followed by a massive shock and low oil prices. Has this country, because when I talk to young people, they worry that the country hasn't, and they worry that in a few years, if oil prices suddenly rise again and then fall again, we'll be back where we started. What can you say right now to assure them that that's not the case?
Well, I think a lot has to do with, first with discipline, and with, the way that government approaches its business. I think that we have shown that we can be disciplined, and we've shown even in the execution of our plans that we're disciplined about it and that we're serious about it. I think also the fact that this particular oil shock led to a recession and to grave economic consequences is a lesson that will be much more difficult to forget than in the past. And I think also the resurgence of the non-oil sector in several ways is also evidence of the fact that we can't go back the same way. We really can't go back the same way. And there's also evidence all over the world that oil is gradually losing relevance. So we're not going to have much of a choice, if you see what I mean. I mean, in the next 10, 15 years or so, it's going to be extremely difficult to live on oil for any oil-producing country. I mean, look at China, Japan. Everybody's investing in electric cars. Japan has more charging stations for cars than petrol stations. China is subsidizing electric cars. The UK, several European countries are setting deadlines for more energy-efficient cars, electric cars, and those kinds of things. So we really won't have a choice. I don't think that we're going to have the luxury of sliding back into some, comfort that comes from hydrocarbon resources. I don't think we're going to have that luxury. And I think it's going to become evident in the next few years.
But given that we've been through a recession, I think you're right in the sense that it's going to be very difficult to forget what we've experienced in this country. But I think that a lot of Nigerians actually need to change their habits, especially when it comes to relying on imports. At CNN, we've talked about many times about the Made in Nigeria campaign, the desire of the Nigerian government to encourage people to buy Made in Nigeria products. Now, it's one thing to actually encourage entrepreneurs and help entrepreneurs actually develop startups in this country, but it's a completely different thing to get the buying Nigerian public to change their habits, to change sort of resorting to imports as the first resort. So what can you do to actually change the buying habits of Nigerians, to actually get them to look at products that are made in this country and say, you know what, I'm going to prefer that over the imports?
I think the way it works really is that at the end of the day it's an economic choice, a choice that you have to make. If imports are more expensive, as they are now, you're going to have to make a choice to buy local. I mean, government has a policy. As I said, we have an executive order which was issued, which insists that government itself must purchase locally, must give priority to local content goods, must give priority to goods that have, local content, economic choices. If people see that imports are more expensive, they're more likely going to look for local options. And already that is becoming the case. Local options are definitely becoming more popular.
Will that still be the case when we're out of the recession?
I think so. I think we're going to have a situation where, because if you look at what we're seeing, I mean, I've seen that manufacturing in Nigeria, if you look at agro-processing, food, beverages, etc., is really ramping up. Packaging is much better. Quality is much better. Even clothing, shoes, quality is much better. Things are improving. Many people are buying clothes that are made in Nigeria. More people are wearing made in Nigeria clothing. Textiles are still manufactured. Most of it is imported. But there's a value add because people are actually buying made in Nigeria clothing. I think that we're in a place where